Up until now, we've mostly covered the options available to smaller businesses. But for this video, it's big business time. We're covering a different type of contract that enables companies who consume a lot of electricity to source renewable energy. And it's called Power Purchase Agreements. Even if you're not in big business, just stick around anyway. Power Purchase Agreements, or PPAs, are agreements where an organisation makes a long-term commitment to buy electricity produced by a renewable energy supplier. This commitment gives developers certainty and the funding needed to finance new solar and wind power projects. You might hear different terms being used for PPAs, such as offtake agreement or renewable energy supply, but these are all just generic terms for the same thing, PPAs. There are many different types of PPA contracts out there. For example, you may have heard some industry people talk about on-site versus off-site, but what does that really mean? On-site PPAs are contracts to buy electricity that's generated directly on-site or behind the meter. These are typically from solar panels installed on rooftops. Instead of buying solar systems, some companies prefer to fund or finance the system's upfront cost, and the customer just pays for the electricity over time. After all, you need the electricity, not always the solar panels. But we're actually not going to cover on-site PPAs in this video. Instead, we're going to focus on contracts signed by large organisations who want to buy renewable energy off-site from wind and solar farms. Off-site contracts are typically called corporate PPAs, sometimes referred to as virtual or synthetic, but they all kind of mean the same thing. Now let's take a trip back in time. Corporate PPAs were pioneered by Google back in 2009, when they were looking for ways to purchase renewable energy to meet the growing electricity demands of their data centers. At the time, there was no easy option to buy renewable energy directly from retailers, and they couldn't generate it themselves because of physical and geographical restrictions. They also wanted to have more impact on their renewable energy purchasing, beyond just buying renewable energy certificates. So they used a workaround. Google signed a 20-year agreement with a wind farm in Iowa to purchase all of the electricity output from the farm, as well as all the associated certificates that came with it. The electricity from the farm is sold into the wholesale market, but they retain the RECs attributed to it. Meanwhile, Google would continue purchasing electricity for all of their operations through a standard contract with a retailer. Since then, Google has signed many more of these contracts, and in 2017, it was able to buy enough renewables to cover its entire electricity use and claim to be 100% renewable. This is actually a huge deal because Google consumes twice the amount of electricity the city of San Francisco does in a year. Since Google's first power purchase agreement, many organizations have taken their lead and followed suit. PPAs have become a common option for large companies to source renewable power and commit to 100% renewable energy through programs like the RE100. In Australia, Telstra was the first major corporate to sign a PPA back in 2017. Since then, PPAs have become more and more popular, with some very large Aussie companies also signing contracts directly with solar and wind farms. The popularity of PPAs has had a huge impact in accelerating the decarbonisation of the grid here in Australia. Over 2 gigawatts of wind and solar farms have been underwritten by corporate PPAs since 2017. That's enough electricity to power 1.5 million homes, or 2 flux capacitors. PPAs only used to be available to really large companies who consumed more than 50 gigawatt hours, or over $5 million in electricity costs per year. But with the growing appetite for PPAs, new and innovative contracting options are now becoming available for smaller organisations. Some retailers are signing large-scale PPAs with solar and wind farms, and then providing retail PPAs in smaller sizes to smaller buyers. These PPAs are similar to a standard electricity contract. Another way to make PPAs more accessible to small buyers is to form a buyers group. Individually, each company might be too small to sign on to a PPA in their own right, but as a group, it makes sense because the scale of their electricity consumption profile increases. Check out this super successful buyers group. The Melbourne Renewable Energy Project was a joint effort of 14 organisations. It was the first time in Australia that a group of local governments, cultural institutions, universities and corporations collectively purchased renewable energy from a newly built facility. Over its 25-year life, it will help reduce greenhouse pollution by more than 6.7 million tonnes. Safe to say, it's transformed the way organisations buy renewable energy in Australia.
Yeah, people bell. What's the threshold for a business to be eligible for a PPA?
Large-scale PPAs do require larger customers spending millions on electricity annually, but small customers can get access to a PPA as part of a larger group or through some innovative contracting options. A rough cutoff would be if your electricity is under 5 gigawatt hours or your electricity costs are under $1 million per year.
So if you consume less than that, you can't sign a PPA?
Well, there are some exceptions to the rule. A really important consideration for signing up for a PPA is whether your organisation will still have similar needs in 7 to 10 years' time. Some organisations are very stable by nature. Schools are a good example. A school may not consume a lot of electricity, but it's very likely that it still will be around in 5+ years' time. The Ascam school made headlines in 2019 when it became the first school in New South Wales to sign on to a corporate power purchase agreement to source 90% of its power from regional wind and solar farms over the next decade.
I see. So who's involved in getting a corporate PPA up and running?
The main parties involved in a PPA are the buyer of energy. This is the company that wants to source renewable energy or the individual member of a bigger energy buyers group. Number 2, the seller of energy. This is the renewable energy generator. The owner of a wind or solar farm, for example, if it's a new project that isn't yet built, the certainty of revenue provided by the PPA helps secure financing for the project. And in some cases, there's a third party, the retailer who plays the intermediary between the project developer and the buyer. Other key stakeholders include the financier, who also signs into the PPA agreement, and regulators, such as the AEMO, who operate the grid. Okay, now let's talk about some benefits. The number one benefit for the buyer is protection against rising prices and fluctuating markets. And this is called hedging. As you can see, the Australian electricity market has been a bit of a roller coaster over the years. But if you want a smoother ride, entering into a well-negotiated PPA locks in a fixed electricity price for the duration of your agreement. This reduces your risk of higher, more volatile costs, and your CFO loves that stuff. Another benefit is reduced costs. Over the lifetime of a PPA, you may experience an overall reduction in the cost of electricity below standard retail contracts. Consider this an added benefit, not the primary reason you would head down the PPA path. There's always a chance that wholesale electricity will fall below your agreed PPA price. So securing predictable energy costs is usually seen more favourably by decision makers. Another really important benefit is the strong renewable energy credentials that you get with a PPA. Previously, we learned that not all renewable energy claims stack up in the same way. Some do have more impact than others. A claim is made more substantial when a direct link can be established between the buyer's investment and additional renewable energy being added to the grid. Some PPAs provide this direct link by ensuring that renewable projects get financed. This concept is called additionality, and it plays a major role in assessing the quality or impact of a PPA contract. Additionality is a term that describes renewable energy that is truly new. When your company chooses an investment that creates additional renewable energy projects, it emphasizes your commitment to advancing carbon reductions beyond just business as usual.
Did you say only some PPAs do additionality? Like not all of them?
Well, there are lots of different PPAs out there, and no, not all of them include new projects. Some are just for existing projects. I spoke to an expert at the BRCA recently, and he could think of 250 different types of combinations of contracting options, and all of them were PPAs. In the next video, we'll go through some of the most common options. Not all 250 though, I promise.
Whew.